From Content Area 5. This is the black on black ceramic vessel. It's made by a married couple from who lived at the San Ildefonso Pueblo, which is just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Tiwa is the people group that the Martinez were, and they're part of that. They kind of fall under that umbrella of the Puebloan. And so we're thinking about the Four Corners region where we had Mesa Verde and the Anasazi Pueblo. And then we're thinking about that, what we call the Southwest, right? So the indigenous group is the Tiwa, but where they lived, where Maria was born and lived her whole entire life and died, was the San Ildefonso Pueblo, which I would highly recommend visiting. We went last year, and I got to meet her granddaughter, and so it was really great. So Maria Martinez is the wife, obviously, and she's the one who makes the actual pot itself. So this is not thrown on a wheel. This is a hand-built pot. And she does it with coils. She did it with coils. And then, so she's really thinking about symmetry here, right? As she's building this, all hand-built. And then her husband, Julian, is the painter. And as you guys look at this finish here, you'll see there's kind of a satin finish and there's a matte finish. And this is innovative. This is something that they came up with. And it requires technical excellence, because you can't, if you make a mistake when you're painting on that slip, it's going to show up, right? It's going to have to be scraped back off, sanded back out. If you paint over the same area with the slip twice, you're going to see that. So it requires a lot of finesse to be able to paint like this. So the pottery is made by the wife, Maria. The painting, because this is collaborative, the painting is done by her husband, Julian, and he's just hand painting it on. And he's painting on with a material called slip. Slip is watered down clay. And so it's clay painted with clay. It is not glazed. So if you guys have made something with clay and you put it in the kiln, fires, then you put kind of the glaze on it and it looks kind of chalky, and then you fire it again, it comes out looking glassy. That's not how this works, okay? That makes your clay watertight. This is not watertight. It's for holding dry goods, okay, was its original intention. And it is made with this, this hand building and firing process, which we'll talk about. Mid 20th century, and then it's blackware. These are what we call registers, these two bands that go around the pot. And then the designs here are very abstracted, stylized, traditional designs, and we'll talk more about that as well. So here's a photograph of Maria Martinez up there on the right, and her husband, Julian. Julian was a little bit older than her. They were both born like 1870s-ish, and then she lived until 1980. And again, spent all her time on at the Pueblo. Now, she and her husband did eventually become famous, especially Maria, and they went and they traveled. They presented their work at the World's Fair, so they were notable in their lifetime. Okay, and Julian died earlier, but she lived a long time. Please consider the importance of Maria Martinez. She is the reason why non-Indigenous people collect Indigenous pottery, specifically from the Southwest. She gets all the credit for that, okay? Very, very important. So we'll talk about her influence and why she did that. She is the reason that Native American ceramic is viewed as a fine art, not just a utilitarian object. So in the 1880s, the train, railroad started coming through this region, and with the train came cheap, almost indestructible metal containers, right? So you could spend pennies and get a metal bowl, or which was hard to break, right? Or you could spend all the effort and time and trade of getting a ceramic handmade pot. And so the indigenous people start switching from using these vessels as they've been used traditionally for holding dry goods, ritual objects, cooking. Now they're using metal containers. And so what Maria does is she realizes, okay, to keep my job, right, making objects, to keep this tradition, this native identity alive, we have to sell to the non-indigenous people, right? So she goes to Santa Fe. She starts encouraging galleries to carry her work, right, stores to carry her work, and they start selling work to people who visit the Pueblo. And so she would just give away her tiny, tiny little pots to people when they'd visit, and she'd sell them for a few bucks. And now her work sells crazy. And so last year for our anniversary, my husband and I bought a piece of her work, and I'll do a separate video and show it to you guys. Her big, 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 huge pots, which there's very few in existence, sell for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So ours is not like that, but her work is very highly collectible, right? So she realizes to save this art making tradition, to keep a job for her and her husband, she has to start selling to people who are not indigenous, right? Non-natives. So again, they're selling to people who are coming to visit the Pueblo. They're selling to people who are visiting galleries and shows in Santa Fe. And my husband and I bought ours from a gallery in Santa Fe. So that's still where a lot of people purchase her work. Now, think about this as a collaborative art, right? So she's building with coils, these vessels. Her husband is painting. And then she would be able to have other people help her make the clay, help her source the clay. And so this is collaborative. Again, she and her husband taught their children, their grandchildren, and it's a family tradition. All right, so one of the things they did form here to make the pottery stronger, okay, is they mixed in grit, sediment, some fired crumbled pieces of clay that were already hard, right, had already been through the kiln. They mixed those in with the wet clay, and so as you built, you had this reinforcement in the clay. The shape that she's built here is called an olla, O-L-L-A, okay? It's kind of like a round, kind of short, fat, squat pot. Again, no artist, no pottery reel, right? She's hand building these things. And then after it was created, right, and it had dried, then Julian would use a paintbrush and he would paint on this design, okay? And then they would burnish the exterior. So burnishing the exterior would be done with a smooth river rock. He would burnish it, and so it would end up with this smooth, I mean, they feel amazing, these smooth, nice pots. And then you can compare the satin finish, which is the shinier finish, to the matte finish, okay? The pots, when they were fired, of course, they didn't have an electric kiln like we have at the high school. So they're building an adobe kiln, right? Kind of building it into the ground, and then they're firing it in an iron-rich environment. And the way they got the fire hot enough for this firing was by using manure, which would burn hot. Again, communal activity. She passed this down through her family. This is what her signature looks like on the bottom of this piece of pottery. She became famous, and when she did, the people buying her work, right, which are the non-natives, are asking her to sign it. And signing art is a very Western idea, right? That's the kind of thing that they're doing in Europe and in the Americas, the European Americas, right? Not indigenous Americas. And so to sign her work was really something she did because it was becoming collectible. And she realized her signature was worth something. And so she started helping other women, potters, by showing them techniques, helping them create the pot and then signing her name along theirs, knowing that her name would bring value to that piece of pottery, right? She was very humble, just trying to better her community, her pueblo, San Ildefonso. Another interesting thing, so in terms of themes, I'd say innovation, because the black on black wear is a new style, but it's also tradition and change, because Julian was really interested in archaeology. So he would actually go on digs to old Pueblo sites, ancestral Pueblo sites in the Four Corners region. And he would find old pieces of pottery and wall paintings. He would sketch those designs down, and then he would incorporate that into his paintings on their pottery. And so the designs are old, traditional Puebloan designs that they're bringing to this 20th century modern market. And then I would say something about the idea, again, is collaborative, maybe could be a theme, and then decorative and functional. So their original intention was to be functional, to hold dry goods for the indigenous people, but they actually became decorative collectibles to non-natives. We talked about all this. It's an oxygen deprived environment, just like we talked about with the Niobetis crater and the Greek vases, to be able to get that black. We would call these registers, right, that go around the outside. They have kind of an Art Deco geometric feel, but of course most of the designs are looking back to these ancient Puebloan designs. So whenever I was talking to Maria and Julian's granddaughter, I said, now I've read, because, this is what Khan Academy and others had said, that this might be a bird, this might be rain clouds. And she had no interest in that. She was like, these are just ancient Puebloan designs that represent different seasons, different elements of nature. But she did not want them to be a direct, like hieroglyphics, like this stands for this, right? The fact that I was trying to like pin her down and what's this shape and what's this, she was like, it's up to the artist. And I was like, oh. So they're abstracted ancient motifs, okay, that they're using in their paintings. So I'm going to make another video for you guys of my own personal Indigenous American art collection, and I will share it with you guys. But that's all for this piece, and that's all for Content Area 5. So